When a sliver of frigid moonlight in the deep night of ancient Greece slanted across the marble pillars of the palace of Ithaca, mottled by years of neglect, the air was steeped in the faint scent of wormwood and the bittersweet crispness of sea mist dispersed by the night wind. Within an inner chamber shrouded by heavy dark curtains, where the distant murmur of Aegean waves striking the cliffs could be heard, a woman, her eyes reflecting a profound sense of universal desolation, quietly opened her hands, slightly calloused from years of gripping the shuttle. She was not weaving a magnificent shroud, instead upon a yellowed fabric, with movements both agonizingly slow and ruthlessly precise, she was unraveling the warp and weft woven by day. Each thread's fall was infinitesimal, as if measuring the very velocity of passing time. She was Penelope, Queen of Ithaca, an intellectual sentinel who chose contemplation at the heart of power's vortex, exiling herself to repetitive labor for 20,000 days and nights. This is a chronicle of how restraint erupts into power, and how waiting is transmutated into nobility. The genesis of Penelope's life held none of the clamor typical of a war god. Instead, it was a dark gray foundation woven from rigorous aristocratic codes and irrevocable lineage within the deep green shadows of Spartan temples. Born as the eldest daughter and destined bearer of sacred order, she learned in libraries reddened by the glow of campfires, to use her gaze to perceive the structures of fate lurking behind every vanishing point. Brilliant and possessed of an intellectual haughtiness, she rejected the superficial pleasures of the inner court, turning instead to the embrace of scrolls filled with natural sciences, philosophy and celestial laws, tools with which she measured the vastness of the soul. This almost pathological pursuit of orderly truth became the first incurable fold in her psyche, and the only armor that would guard her reality in a world of chaos. She understood that prosperity was not bartered by divine favor, but was a sacred logic that grew naturally from an ultimate respect for rules and human nature. Her marriage into Ithaca and the sight of her husband, Odysseus, being dragged into the world-shaking Trojan War served as the practical crucible where Penelope pushed her aesthetics of strategy to its absolute zenith. Fate, in that endgame of life and death stakes, dealt her the heaviest and most perilous counters. She resolutely transformed the shroud she wove for her father-in-law, Laertes, into an ultimate moral experiment, replacing the endless succession of power with prolonged restraint. In those quiet nights, where only the rhythmic slide of the shuttle could be heard, she issued silent commands that stabilized the psychological order of Ithaca. In those moments, Penelope was the most sober and solitary artisan of the Greek world. She accepted every taunt from the suitors with silence, standing like a marble bell tower, solitary and soaring, yet indestructible. The summit of power in the eyes of the wise is manifested as the penetration of truth. Penelope gradually realized that as she finally garnered acclaim through her long weaving ruse, she had obtained not just an altar, but a nihility that saw through the rise and fall of all things. She discovered that those heroic ideals, once so grand as to be hubristic, appeared, before the cruel mirror of time, as a fragility more potent than any oracle. This transition, returning from queen to watcher, was fraught with intellectual struggle. She remarked in her final resonance, "I once believed I was building a home, now I find I am merely searching for a point of convergence within the scarred fissures of memory, where the soul no longer falls." This expansive clarity, born from seeing through the transience of material desires, became her hardest armor in her final hours. Penelope's final season was spent in a state of profound solemnity and a silence, illuminated by the radiance of a sage. She understood that the age of order belonging to the ancient gods was nearing its end, and that she, the gatekeeper of the era, would soon be interred in the dust of legend. She closed her eyes, and with those hands that had held 10,000 scepters of power, she traced a final arc of completion across her chest. She left behind no vast dynastic legacy. She left only the scorched solitary wisdom of conscience that still glows after 2 millennia. Her fading away was like a magnificent concerto entering its final decrescendo, marking the official curtain call of the era known as reason's mourning of classical ideals in a steady resonant echo. Even today, 2,000 years after the myths faded, the name Penelope remains the sole sanctuary for many insomniac seekers in the deep of night. What she left behind was not a towering monument of victory, but a spiritual template of self-restraint and high-born departure. In absolute shadow, she maintained absolute sobriety. Amidst absolute temptation, she held on to absolute logic. Beneath the ruins of the fortress, worn smooth by history, she maintains that posture of leaning her head to listen, as if still soothing this increasingly restless and anxious world. Her life was an eon-long cultivation of deconstructing brilliance, an intellectual long march seeking sacred rhythms amidst the chaotic dust of the world. Penelope's story thus draws to a slow close amidst the fading whispers of the Aegean tides. She was never an opportunist seeking fame through her art. She was merely a weary soul who yet steadfastly refused to compromise with mediocrity. Inner tranquility is your only true and eternal refuge. No matter how trivial your life or how deep your predicament, please believe that in everyone's life there is a loom of their own, a private space for dialogue with a self that requires no outward explanation. May Penelope's serenity and vastness become the softest feather in your dreams, carrying you to the farthest, most tranquil shore of the soul. Good night, and may sweet dreams be with you.